So good evening everyone. Just as people are logging on to tonight's Facebook Live, I wanted to take an opportunity to acknowledge the Gay and Magal people who are part of the Eora Nation as the traditional owners and custodians upon the land upon which we work and recover at South Pacific. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So tonight we're talking about breaking the silence, men's mental health and overcoming stigma, and I'm delighted to welcome Glyn, South Pacific therapist, principally runs the Changes program, which is the early childhood trauma program, because who better to ask someone about mental health for men than a man? And I wanted to just setting the scene for this evening's session that we've been discussing how men are raised with an expectation to be strong and to some extent unemotional. Now, whilst speaking up about mental health has become more commonplace in society, there's still stigmas that prevent men from reaching out for professional help when they need it. So tonight we're going to be talking about that. And so I wanted to start probably, because I'm going to say less tonight than you used to, and Glyn's going to say more.
Hopefully.
So what are some of the common issues faced by men, the common mental health issues, do you think? Glyn?
Common. Anxiety and depression, when I work with people who come into changes, they often come into South Pacific for addiction, issues with addiction, gambling, work addiction is a big thing. In my practice, I tend to see a lot of people with anxiety and depression. That seems to be the main thing that I deal with men. So.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's nearly like they'll put their hand up for anxiety, depression, or, workaholism, for example. We throw that word around. But there's often underlying causes for how that's shown up in their adult life. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sorry, could you just say that again?
So when they come in for anxiety and depression, I mean, it's not that's not untrue. They do have anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
But particularly when they're coming into South Pacific, there's a lot more underlying issues.
Yeah, look, I really believe that depression... Sorry, what does that?
I don't know, we'll just get Leanna to fix that.
Okay. Anxiety and depression, it appears to me, and this is my thoughts, as well as some of the literature I've read, it's just an inability to actually process particular emotions, or it's like a suppression of emotions, like they need to suppress particular emotions or repressed emotions, meaning that they avoid certain situations, they avoid certain emotions, and rather than feeling like grief or something, they'll go straight to anger. Particularly men, they either get very shut down, or it's almost like it's socially acceptable for men to be angry. Like we're supposed to be angry. Like if you're an angry man, that's kind of normal, right? But if you're afraid, if you have fear, then it's a taboo. I'm speaking as a man for men here, okay? Which is I'm not discounting like women in anything I say.
No.
But it really is about men. Yeah.
And I know Pia used to say, it's okay for men to be angry. That's acceptable. If a woman's angry, she's like a shrew or a mad woman. It's not okay for men to be crying or into a lot of emotion, because then they're considered weak, and none of us are meant to have pain. So across the board, we're not actually taught how to feel our emotions, and the fact that there's only 8 of them, and that feeling them as they come up means they don't run us. We're not beholden to them.
And that's a good point. You said there's 8 emotions. Well, I mean, some people would argue there's only two. Some people argue four. Some
Oh.
people argue more. I've heard it's only fear and love.
Oh, right,
Like
okay.
that's the
Yes.
old, or four emotion. I'm not going to go through them there, but regardless, actually, definitely what you say with the most, particularly with men, and when I get them in changes, it's really hard for them to identify what they're actually feeling. It's always like, I'm pissed off, or I'm angry, or I feel love and joy, which I'm not sure if they actually do feel love and joy. I think
No.
that just means get off my back and leave me alone. that in my experience.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
like, they don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's for men. It's. I mean, I could speak about myself, but I probably want to talk partly that, but mostly about the patients I see in the hospital. I get a lot of shut down emotion. Like I find myself teaching or exploring, particularly with men, what they're actually feeling, where they're feeling it in their body is a good sign. Like with, they think, oh, I feel angry, or I feel this. What are you feeling in my stomach? Is it like gnawing at you? Or, yeah. Well, that's guilt. For me, a guilty feeling is where it's kind of gnawing in my belly.
Yes.
So yeah.
Whereas shame is like a total body experience.
Particularly if it's carried shame, which they talk a lot about in SPP, carried emotions. I mean, I come from a shame. I was shamed very much as a child, put down, and I took on my parents acting shameless towards me, which basically means that they were acting in a way which didn't take my feelings or myself as a child into consideration. They were literally like, I was told what to do, told how to be, and my authentic self was crushed. So that shame is like an all-over feeling. It paralyzes me almost. But my own shame, my own slight embarrassment, or whatever you want to call it, kind of feel that in my face a little bit. Can be humorous sometimes.
Yeah. Somebody's just made a comment. Men lose their temper, women lose their minds. Yes, well, I think there's a lot of truth in that. So the other thing I want to talk a bit about, because this is my experience certainly when dealing with when people have moved into addiction. So let's say they've moved into alcoholism, drug addiction, sex. Which fundamentally we talk about them being the disease of self-obsession. But when we talk about something like sex addiction, for example, because I want to just put that on the table and to name it, that often loneliness and isolation play a very big part as drivers for sex addiction and love addiction. Would you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, it's basically it's a cry for connection, to be honest.
Right.
And plus, I mean, we could talk about. Wow, this really opened up like a big crack. I could really go down the rabbit hole and spend the whole session here, like talking about sex addiction. But really, it's about a feel good, chasing a high, wanting to actually connect, but not knowing how to. And sex addiction. I mean, I don't consider myself a sex addict, but I've definitely been sexually anorexic, whereas I've
restrict
completely.
Yeah.
And I have been in sex addiction, that basically obsession and compulsion, right? Like I don't want to feel what I'm feeling, whatever that is, because my emotions were like, I was either hysterically happy or angry. Really, that's probably it. And I would have been feeling shame, guilt, all that stuff, but inability to feel it. So I would have used sex as well as other things. To not feel that horrible feeling I was feeling.
And often I would speak with sex addicts or love addicts and say, it's when it's like in here, in your gut, there's this enormous chasm, of emptiness. And often it comes out of being enmeshed or parentified as a child. Where when we're little, mum or dad, I mean, for you it was probably mum, for me it would be dad. I had to look after his emotions. You have to look after her emotions. So then I can't sit with this chasm of emptiness and despair. So I'm going to do anything I can to not have to feel that, yeah? So when we're talking about the Changes program, for example, or even doing the timelines and first steps in South Pacific in the primary group, we're talking about uncovering that experience and then feeling into it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think the hardest part of my job and in my practice too, I'll always say, people will say, oh yeah, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, but to get them to drop into their bodies is very difficult. And I find this particularly with men. It's like it's more in their head, what they're supposed to think, what they're supposed to feel. But to get them to drop from the head down into the body somatically, I always find that quite difficult, actually. A lot of men, yet again, I'm talking about men because this is men's health, not discarding women. I'm very mindful of that because I don't see too many differences between men and women. But I do see a lot more with men.
But do you find, generally speaking, that women will, as a general rule, will ask for help from a professional quicker than men? And I think this is, when we're talking about this, we called it breaking the stigma. It's the stigma of a man being able to say, look, I'm not coping very well. I mean, predominantly, wouldn't it be fair to say that when men come into South Pacific, the wheels have fallen off pretty much everything? Whereas women will come in and often they've still got stuff intact in a way.
I'm thinking of one of my clients right now. It wasn't until he was bedridden, been through several relationships, the same theme, depression. You know, and he was bedridden for like 3 months before finally he actually reached out and got some help.
Wow.
I'm doing some great work with him, actually. But I'm uncovering a lot of stuff. The amount of trauma that's gone on in his family. And he parentified his mum after his father died. And so like, there's a lot. But look, depression and anxiety, like I said, I deal with it. But when you, there's a difference between sadness, right?
Yes.
And depression.
Yes.
I mean, people use this word a lot, like, oh, I'm depressed. No. You're sad. You're sad. Right? Sad is kind of happenstance. You know, something happens. I don't feel good about it, but I go to bed for a day or two. Or it could last for a little while. That's sadness. But depression is very different. It's, you know, whether it's clinically, you know, like there's something going on in here, or basically the person is trying to uphold, particularly men, we have to hold up this image that I'm strong and I'm emotionless, and you know, holding up that front, that ego state is so incredibly taxing on the body and the mind, the psyche, that eventually the body goes, I can't do this anymore. You know, and that's where you go into depression. It's like, I just can't do this anymore. But you're unaware. This is my experience too. You know, I was unaware that I couldn't keep up this front, this facade anymore. It was exhausting.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about addiction, because you know, often
it's another one I could go down.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we do talk a lot about addiction, and we do work a lot with addicts. And
we do.
When we're talking about addiction, we're talking about across the board. We're talking about, you know, alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, prescription medication,
people.
Yes, relationships. Yeah, that's right. And also, work, of course, and shopping, which are to some extent less or more acceptable, if you get my drift. I mean, you know, you're allowed to be busy and you're allowed to be working really hard because you're looking after the family, but it's the others that'll actually often bring you to the knees quicker. So when we're talking about addiction, we're talking about an inability to use the substance or do the behaviour without it having a big impact on our lives, right? We're not talking about a slight dependence. You know, I'm not going home and having 3 wines because I've had a bit of a tough day.
Right. We're talking about something that's taken over our lives and actually interfering with our lives interpersonally.
That's right, exactly.
In fact, I had one of my clients online I was chatting to just the other day was talking, he's a gamer, big gamer, gaming addiction, which is a new thing.
Yeah, right.
Not that new, but straight away he says, well, you know, my friend does this, da, 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 da. I'm not as bad as him. However, his gaming is really getting in the way of his relationship with his partner, and it took a little bit of uncovering with that. But yeah, and he would say, well, what is too much? What is an addiction? I'm like, is it, you know, you're still managing to go to work? Yeah. Oh yeah. We narrowed it down to it is taking time away from his partner, and he uses it to escape. And I think that's the thing with every addiction, isn't it? I mean, it's not a problem until it's a problem, right? But it's a problem for other people.
Yeah.
But you don't see it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's not until, particularly for men, well, for me, I was a hardcore addict when I was in active addiction, substances and alcohol and other things. It wasn't until my life, like nobody wanted anything to do with me.
No.
You know, and I was not feeling anything, you know, except rage and numbness. That's about it.
Yeah. So we're really talking about a repeating behaviour that interferes with your life. We might be stealing or selling things to get money to continue to use to support the habit. We're often engaging in dangerous or risky behaviour, and that's particularly when we're talking about drugs usually, or sex.
Not sex.
Losing interest in other things, being angry, violent, moody, changes in eating habits, sleeping habits, lying about our usage to family and friends, keeping secrets about our usage. Yes, that's right, and keeping secrets to ourselves. So it's when we're actually perhaps we've come from a traumatic history. We've used some substances, alcohol, drugs, to cover how we feel. We then end up in a state of anxiety and depression, and then come into South Pacific. Now, how many clients have you worked with? I mean, I don't really need a number, but across it is a rhetorical question. So how many clients have you worked with where they've come in and gone, I'm here for anxiety and depression? And then
80% of them.
Yeah, that's right. And so halfway through their 3-week intake, they're going, actually, I think it's a problem that I have with alcohol and drugs, or with sex.
You hear that in South Pacific, don't you? Like, I came in because I had a bit of a problem getting out of bed in the day, and I realised I'm an alcoholic. That's right. I'm this, I'm codependent. Yeah. Absolutely.
And stress, of course, which is related more to work and pressure of family, being the one that has to keep it all together, as you say, then that would also play a big part, wouldn't it? Stress.
Absolutely.
Trying to live up to somebody else's expectation of me.
Maintaining that stoic kind of, you know, manly kind of like, I've got everything in control. And let's face it, you know, I think on the whole, men are fixers. Yes. You know, like I've been guilty of that myself. Yeah. You know, wanting to fix, you know, here's the problem, here's the solution. Yeah. It's not innate I don't know if it's innate, but it's certainly was not modeled to me and for most people I work with to actually be able to listen, you know, to someone with a problem. You just want to fix. Because I'm not able to listen, because I wasn't able to listen, it was just, I didn't realize that I was really uncomfortable with the fact that they're having a problem. And I wanted to fix that, but I was wanting to really just shut them up.
Well, and the truth of all of that, as we now know in this profession, if I can't sit with my pain, I can't sit with yours.
That's right.
So I'm going to go to fixing. So let's just talk about, you know, because I'm conscious that time is moving on faster than I expected.
Oh my gosh, yes.
There you are.
Okay.
So what we offer at South Pacific, of course, is a 3-week intake program. But in addition to that, we do have men's relational recovery. We do have a sex addicts group. You know, across the board, we have other groups that can be of some support for you. Also, and I want to just point this out for people that are listening because they've got an addict or they've got a man in their life who's really struggling, we've got Family Education Day, which is a 1-day program that you can, you know, log on to and start to learn about childhood trauma, start to learn about addiction, and start to see what's available. So I think they're very helpful for people. You can always ring South Pacific's intake number, which is a 1-800 number, which we'll put up in the chat directly. So I think the final question I want to ask you is, what do you think is the thing that prevents men from asking for professional help?
Shame, probably.
Okay.
Shame.
And is it theirs? Now, you mentioned carried shame earlier. Do you think that they're carrying stuff from their childhood?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
They probably carry like codependency, right? Like what they see in their own family upbringing, what they see mum and dad do.
Yes.
Okay, is what is modeled to them.
Yeah.
Okay, and so they kind of bring it into their relationships, whatever their relationship, whether they were, with their wife or if it's two men, and so they're repeating the same pattern as what they saw. They may have seen dad be abused, and he deserves it because that's what was modeled. Yeah. And so that person then becomes the abusee in their relationship. Yes. And they think that they don't deserve anymore because of shame.
And of course, also to mention the intergenerational trauma that comes down the generations. If it isn't felt in this generation, we'll carry it on to the next. So I just want to move very quickly to a couple of questions that are here. So what's the solution if someone has been in SPP and done the changes program and they're still an addict? Well, I'm going to jump in on that one.
I know what you're going to say too.
The first thing I'm going to say is, how much of your aftercare plan did you do? That's the first question, because that's quite a significant process you go through in South Pacific also. You don't just get spat out the other end, you get supported to put together a new way of life. Also, if you're still an addict, then are you doing your 12-step recovery? Do you have a sponsor? Are you doing regular meetings? And by regular, I mean in early recovery, a day, 90 meetings in 90 days. In fact, as a matter of interest, I had a client here the other day, and she, her son's just been through South Pacific, and she was asking questions about, she's gone to Al-Anon to support herself and her husband. And she was asking about what she could do to support him. I said, get into AA. That's the best thing you can do. So, also...
reduces the shame.
Yeah, that's right. And because it's collective. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people in the room that are dealing with the same stuff you're dealing with, so there's absolutely no shame in it at all. It's like that terrible joke they say in South, when you're out on using and drinking, what's your drug of choice? It's like, well, what do you got?
Yours.
Yeah, that's right. So now next one from earlier, I wanted to add sex addicts, come on, love addicts, cling on. Ray's got a way with words. And romance addicts, move on. But vulnerability, fear of helplessness, fear of intimacy being overrun or abandoned. That's absolutely true, Ray. And all comes out of childhood trauma that's unaddressed, and it will play out in our relationships. If we've been abused or traumatised as children, and we are not in a position, we have not been given an opportunity to start to work through it and get clear about it, it'll show up in our intimate relationship. Guarantee.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
no doubt about that. And I think it's fascinating because when we're working with the Pia Melody model of developmental immaturity, we're talking about, this is what we're talking about in the first 20 years of your life, and this is how it's going to show up in the roles that we then play in our relationships. Do you remember the hero being firstborn, the scapegoat, and the lost child? It's a wonderful program, I have to say. So what have we got here? Heroic ego armor, hang on, I've just lost him. Where was that? Counter dependency archetypal, yes, of course. No. Now, Margot, what's we got to say? Hang on, sorry. In seeking support and reaching out to help address our challenges, both men and women will learn to forgive themselves. The anger build-up, SPP, are geared to get them to be at peace and learn to be the great person they are. Thank you, Margot. I think that's absolutely right. I think that's no doubt about that. Let's just see what else we've got here. So if you've got any questions, you're welcome to ask them. Just finally coming up. So we've talked about anxiety and depression. We've talked about loneliness and isolation. We've talked about addiction in its broader sense. We've mentioned stress. We've talked about responsibility, the shame that men live with. We've mentioned that men and women, there's not a lot of difference really. I mean, men will probably burn their life to the ground before they reach out for help, but that's probably the only one. Is there anything else you'd like to add to it before we...
Well, interesting, when we talk, the one thing that does differ between men and women is the suicide rate. Now, this is a topic that is close to my heart because I have lost men to suicide.
Good point.
And look, on average, I think globally it's pretty much the same amount of men and women, bit more men attempt suicide. However, 3 to 4 men are 3 to 4 times more likely to die of suicide, which means that they actually go through with it and they get the job done, so to speak. Yes. And it's often quite violent. Like it happens. Yes. So when a man, they're going to do it. It's not usually a cry for help, which I find very sad, and I can feel some emotion coming up now because this is actually quite close to me. I've lost many people to that, and so it doesn't get spoken about enough, I think, and I think it's very sad. Yeah. So.
There's a lot. Certainly, I think we talk more about rural, people in rural areas, men in rural areas taking their own life because they're more isolated out there, I guess. But that doesn't belie the fact that within the cities, they're still taking their own life too. Yeah. I think you make a very good point, and I'm sorry that I missed that. I should have mentioned that earlier. And I know that there is help available.
There is.
Irrespective of what you're dealing with as a man or a woman, come to that, but we're talking about men tonight. Irrespective of what you're dealing with, help is available. And I would support you to reach out for help.
Yeah.
Predominantly, I mean, there have been plenty of times at South Pacific where we've had more men in the facility than women.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting to me because I think it is becoming more acceptable. And if men can connect with other men, see, I think one of the things that sometimes happens with men is men take their pain to women, and what they need to learn to do is to take it to other men. And when I run men's groups here, I find that they really connect very deeply with each other because of the shared, the fact that they don't have to be shamed because of whatever their experience is in childhood or now in their lives. So,
I think all men want that kind of nurture and love from another man, but they just don't know how to get it.
Yes.
It's just not modeled well, mostly. It's just like toughen up, pull your socks up, just get on with it, mate.
Yeah.
That kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But I know for me personally, like I just secretly didn't realize I really was craving that connection, with another man and to feel safe without having to be walled up, guarded up, or be the tough man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just, that was something I can do now. Yeah.
Which is wonderful. And great healing in that, isn't there? When you get to that point where you can go, actually, I can ask for help.
You're able to help others, which is what we do.
Yeah. So, asking for help, professionally or otherwise, firstly in your family, if that's what you want to do, or professionally from us or anybody else, it's not a result of weakness, moral failure, or lack of willpower. This is the human condition we're all living with. We're living in a time we're in a lot of strain and stress in the world. We've got wars going on that none of us want to be going on. We've got cost of living pressures, never mind about all the other things that go on in our life, work and career and things like that. So feel free to reach out for help to South Pacific. If you think that we can help you, we would be very willing to do that. Yep. So thanks for staying with us tonight. We're very grateful to be having the opportunity to speak to you about men's health, men's mental health, and breaking that stigma. Do you want to sign off, Glyn?
Not sure what to say now. Actually, could keep talking. Actually, you said that this would Yeah, I might just say that this is the first time I've ever done anything like this. Like it's a podcast, right? So this is the first, hopefully of many. And this was one of my fears, like putting myself out there online. I've never ever done that, and so kind of overcome that fear tonight. And surprisingly, it's very comfortable. I just hope that what I've said, I'm only doing this because I want to be able to help. I'm very keen, and I love my job. I love what I do. I love what I do at South Pacific. And if this is going to help someone, this is the only reason why I'm doing it. So.
And you've done extremely well.
Oh, thank you.
So,
I'll do my best.
Ray says thanks. Linky says thank you.
All
Deborah
right.
says thank you. It was wonderful with both of you. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for signing on tonight. Mark says thank you. So cheerio from Tazania, Los Angeles. Good on you.
All right.
Patrick. Oh, good on you, Patrick. Great job, Glyn. There you are. That's
thank
what
you.
he's saying. So there, spread the word. It's
Yeah.
okay to ask for help. Doesn't matter what your sexual persuasion, what your problem is. Help's available, and thank God we live in a society where we can do that. Thank you, Peter. Great. Thank you for logging on.
Thank you very much.